Today, June 8, 2026. As satellite feeds captured the faint glow of activity along Iran's southern coastlines, oil tankers laden with critical cargoes altered course away from the narrow choke point of the Strait of Hormuz, their captains receiving urgent warnings from naval command centers monitoring the escalating tensions.
I need 20 seconds your times.
The tension between Iran and America is reaching a whole new level, and the world is divided. But the real question is, who do you stand with? America has official live voting open right now to see where the public support lies. If you love America and want to show your support, go to the description or the pinned comment right now. If you are using an Android, click the Android link, and if you are on an iPhone, click the iOS link. Just complete the quick 1-minute verification to make your vote count officially, and let's show the strength of America. Go vote now.
Radar systems in the Persian Gulf lit up with unexpected contacts, while intelligence analysts in multiple capitals pored over imagery showing Iranian energy infrastructure under strain, refineries operating at reduced capacity amid reports of rolling blackouts that had become a daily torment for millions. What happens when a nation sitting atop vast oil reserves can no longer reliably fuel its own economy or sustain its population's basic needs? The situation inside Iran had grown far more precarious than surface-level headlines suggested. With economic pressures, fuel shortages, and deepening internal fractures threatening to unravel the system's stability, even as external conflicts continue to reshape the broader region. Commercial satellite passes revealed clusters of inactive storage tanks near key terminals, while shipping data indicated a sharp drop in Iranian crude and condensate exports, falling dramatically to levels not seen in years as U.S. naval actions and lingering effects of the Strait's disruptions squeezed revenue streams. Inside Tehran, power outages stretched for hours each day, halting industries and leaving households in darkness, a stark contrast to the country's resource wealth that should have buffered such vulnerabilities. The rial's value had plummeted further in recent months, with reports of rapid depreciation fueling inflation that eroded purchasing power and sparked sporadic protests in urban centers. Yet the regime's response remained a careful calibration between repression and rhetoric, as divisions between power centers, the presidency, the IRGC, and clerical leadership surfaced in subtle but telling ways, raising questions about cohesion at the very moment when unified action was most needed. Defense planners tracking the Gulf watched as tanker traffic rerouted through alternative paths, driving up global freight costs and contributing to energy price volatility that rippled into Europe and Asia. For Iran, the inability to export freely meant stranded oil at home, forcing difficult choices on domestic allocation and exacerbating shortages of refined products like gasoline and diesel. This was not merely a logistical hiccup, it exposed deeper structural weaknesses in refining capacity and maintenance, long hampered by sanctions and now compounded by infrastructure damage from prior escalations. Public frustration simmered, with reports of unrest in cities where fuel queues lengthened and basic goods grew scarce. Yet official narratives downplayed the scale while security forces maintained a visible presence to deter larger mobilizations. And if you are finding value in this detailed daily breakdown, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more unfiltered geopolitical intelligence that connects the dots others miss. The economic blockade's impact extended beyond borders, as reduced Iranian supply interacted with broader market dynamics, pushing prices higher in ways that affected everything from European heating costs to Asian manufacturing inputs. Within Iran, tensions between reform-minded elements and hardline factions grew more pronounced, with leaks suggesting debates over how aggressively to respond to external pressures versus addressing domestic grievances. Satellite imagery occasionally hinted at military posturing near key sites, but the real story unfolded in the quiet corridors of power, where officials weighed the risks of further isolation against the need to project strength. This internal strain created vulnerabilities that astute observers could not ignore, as any misstep risked amplifying public discontent into something more destabilized. Naval movements in the broader theater added layers of complexity, with U.S. assets maintaining positions that effectively constrained Iranian maritime options, while Iranian forces reportedly prepared contingencies that could further disrupt flows if provoked. The paradox was evident. A country rich in hydrocarbons facing domestic fuel rationing and blackouts, its economy contracting sharply under the weight of lost revenues estimated in billions. Economists tracking the rial's trajectory noted surges in food prices and household costs, pushing more citizens toward poverty lines that had already expanded dramatically. Political analysts pointed to growing divides, where the IRGC's influence clashed with other centers on priorities like resource distribution and negotiation strategies, fostering an atmosphere of caution and mutual suspicion. That silence from certain official channels immediately raised suspicions among regional watchers, hinting at behind-the-scenes deliberations that balanced survival against escalation. Open-source intelligence from shipping trackers and energy monitors painted a picture of constrained exports, with shadow fleet operations facing heightened interdiction risks that further limited cash inflows. Domestically, the energy crisis manifested in halted industrial output, with reports of factories idling and workers impacted, feeding into narratives of systemic failure that opposition voices amplified cautiously despite crackdowns. The regime's legitimacy, already tested by prior waves of protest, faced renewed challenges as economic pain intersected with perceptions of mismanagement, even as external adversaries were blamed publicly. Military intelligence updates highlighted how these economic fractures could influence strategic decisions, potentially limiting Iran's ability to sustain prolonged operations or support proxies amid resource scarcity. In the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point's lingering volatility kept insurers wary, driving premiums skyward and deterring normal traffic patterns that once formed the backbone of regional energy security. For global markets, the ripple was clear. Higher costs for oil and derivatives strained alliances and economies far removed from the Gulf, underscoring how Iran's internal woes were inextricably linked to international power plays. Yet inside the country, the focus remained on managing unrest, with security apparatus deploying to key areas, while leaders navigated factional pressures that complicated coherent policy responses. The real danger lay in how these shortages might erode operational readiness over time, as fuel constraints affected not just civilians, but logistics chains critical to defense postures. Public discourse, filtered through state media, emphasized resilience, but underground reports and diaspora accounts revealed deeper anxiety over inflation spikes exceeding 40% in recent periods, with staples becoming luxuries for many. This bred a quiet institutional fear, where officials privately acknowledged the limits of sanctions evasion tactics that had worked in less intense phases. Geopolitical forecasting suggested that without resolution, these pressures could force difficult concessions or bolder actions, each carrying risks of miscalculation in an already volatile environment. What terrified analysts was the potential for cascading failures, where one sector's collapse accelerated others, from power generation reliant on strained fuel supplies to transportation networks grinding slower under rationing. IRGC-linked entities maintain control over key assets, but even they face challenges in sustaining output amid broader economic headwinds, creating quiet tensions with other power structures. Satellite observations over energy sites occasionally showed reduced activity, a visual testament to the blockade's bite and internal bottlenecks. For the average Iranian, the struggle translated into longer waits, higher costs, and growing disillusionment, elements that regimes historically monitor with heightened vigilance to prevent escalation into widespread mobilization. And if you are finding value in this detailed daily breakdown, make sure to subscribe to OK Samu for frontline analysis that cuts through the noise of conventional reporting. Regional dynamics added urgency, as neighboring states adjusted to altered energy flows, some benefiting from rerouted trade, while others grappled with shortages that echoed Iran's own. US and allied strategies focused on maintaining pressure without full closure, aiming to exploit economic leverage while monitoring for signs of internal fracture that could shift the balance. Intelligence communities tracked communications and movements, seeking indicators of whether political divisions might lead to policy shifts or purges that reshaped decision-making. The situation remained one of controlled tension, where economic warfare intertwined with military posturing in ways that defied simple resolution. Short, punchy developments continued to emerge, such as announcements of emergency measures for fuel distribution that underscored the severity, even as promises of relief rang hollow against persistent blackouts. The interplay between domestic unrest and external isolation deepened strategic vulnerabilities, limiting maneuver room for leadership caught between hardliners demanding defiance and pragmatists eyeing de-escalation. Economic figures painted a contracting GDP, with war-related damages and sanctions amplifying pre-existing woes into a compounding crisis. Viewers of these unfolding events could sense the hidden calculations. How far could the system bend before something gave? And what unintended consequences might follow any attempt to break the impasse through renewed external actions? Tactical details from energy infrastructure reports revealed aging refineries struggling with maintenance backlogs, their output insufficient for both export ambitions and home consumption, a vulnerability long known but now acutely exposed. Political psychology within the establishment showed officials wary of appearing weak, leading to selective leaks and controlled narratives designed to maintain unity while addressing immediate threats. Global repercussions included fertilizer supply disruptions tied to regional instability, affecting agriculture far beyond the Middle East, and linking Iran's fate to food security worldwide. This interconnectedness heightened the stakes, as any prolonged Iranian instability risked broader shocks that no actor could fully contain. The radar-like vigilance of analysts picked up on subtle shifts, such as adjusted military deployments potentially tied to securing internal resources rather than pure external projection. Public protests, though contained, left lingering scars and questions about the regime's ability to deliver stability, fostering an environment where economic grievances mixed with deeper calls for accountability. Fuel shortages spread unevenly, hitting rural and industrial areas harder, and exposing logistical weaknesses in distribution networks. Strategic deception played a role too, with both sides in the broader conflict using information operations to shape perceptions of strength and fragility. Then the implications for naval strategy came into sharper focus, as constrained Iranian revenues limited modernization efforts and sustainment of forces, potentially tilting future engagements. Institutional fears centered on succession uncertainties and factional rivalries that economic stress could exacerbate, creating windows for opportunism that intelligence services watched closely. Open-source data from trade monitors confirmed the export slump's scale, translating into budget shortfalls that forced prioritization of military over civilian needs, a choice not without political cost. The viewer could almost feel the pressure building, as systems strained under multiple fronts with no clear off-ramp in sight. Economic consequences mounted in the form of currency volatility and import difficulties, worsening shortages of parts essential for energy production, and creating a self-reinforcing cycle. Alliances were tested as partners weighed support against their own interests, while Iran navigated relations with buyers like China amid heightened risks. Military movements near borders reflected this unease, blending defensive postures with signals of readiness that masked underlying resource limitations. The narrative unfolding was one of gradual erosion, where each day of shortfall deepened vulnerabilities and invited scrutiny of the regime's long-term viability. Hidden information from field reports suggested growing discontent among mid-level officials tasked with enforcement, adding another layer of internal complexity. Geopolitical forecasting pointed to heightened risks of miscalculation, as economic desperation might push bolder tactics in the Gulf or elsewhere to regain leverage. The audience senses the danger. Tanker reroutes were not just statistics, but harbingers of potential flashpoints if enforcement intensified. This was the hidden logic behind the headlines, a system under siege from within and without, where fuel shortages symbolize deeper failures in governance and adaptation. Short sentences cut through the analysis. The blackouts continued, queues lengthened, tensions simmered. Yet the regime endured. Its responses a mix of force and promises that bought time but eroded trust. Satellite evidence occasionally contradicted official optimism, revealing sites operating below capacity amid maintenance challenges. For defense technology observers, this highlighted how sanctions had hampered upgrades, leaving systems more susceptible to disruption. The broader power struggle involved not just states, but economic weapons that reshaped alliances and capabilities over months. Alliance pressures manifested as Gulf states balanced relations, some quietly benefiting from market shifts while monitoring spillover risks. Inside Iran, the IRGC's role in economic spheres created frictions with civilian administration, evident in competing priorities over resource control. Unanswered questions lingered about potential reforms or crackdowns, each path carrying distinct escalation risks. The situation felt like hidden systems colliding, with civilian hardships feeding into strategic assessments that influenced everything from proxy support to nuclear posturing. Economic shocks traveled far, influencing global inflation and policy debates in distant capitals, yet the core remained Iran's struggle to reconcile its oil wealth with functional delivery. Public unrest, though suppressed, left a residue of fear and resentment that analysts tracked for tipping points. Military intelligence noted logistical strains that could affect sustained operations, forcing conservative planning amid uncertainty. This layered tension kept the region on edge, as any internal rupture could cascade into wider instability. The timing of developments raised suspicions, with fuel announcements coinciding with diplomatic maneuvers that hinted at testing resolve. Institutional psychology revealed leaders prioritizing control over rapid fixes, wary of concessions that might signal weakness. Drone and electronic warfare considerations entered calculations. As resource limits shape technological edges, the viewer is drawn deeper, recognizing how one nation's internal crisis reverberates through global choke points and power balances. Further details from energy reports showed disparities in impact, with urban centers somewhat buffered compared to provinces where shortages bit harder. Political divisions surfaced in debates over engagement strategies, exposing contradictions between public defiance and private pragmatism. Global security implications included re-evaluations of energy dependencies, accelerating shifts toward alternatives in some quarters while others doubled down on Gulf stability measures. The unfolding story carried replay value in its complexity, each element building on the last toward unresolved horizons. Command pressure mounted on those managing the economy, balancing sanctions evasion with domestic demands in an environment of heightened scrutiny. Tactical vulnerabilities in infrastructure became apparent through persistent outages, limiting industrial recovery and military sustainment alike. The real nightmare scenario involved prolonged attrition, where economic isolation eroded capabilities faster than external threats alone could. Observers noted selective information releases designed to project normalcy amid evident strain. Transitions felt natural amid the flow. The economic data underscored fragility, yet external posturing continued. Satellite passes confirmed activity patterns inconsistent with full recovery claims. This duality fueled debate among strategists, highlighting deception's role in information warfare. For the audience, the sense of danger behind headlines intensified with each interconnected revelation. Broader geopolitical ties linked Hormuz dynamics to other theaters, where energy costs influenced support for conflicts elsewhere and shaped US-China calculations. Internal Iranian tensions between power centers risked policy paralysis at critical junctures, a fear that kept analysts vigilant. Fuel shortages, while managed, served as a barometer for systemic health, with potential to ignite further unrest if unaddressed. The script of events remained fluid, full of strategic suspense and hidden implications. Short, high-impact lines punctuated longer sections. Resources dwindled, decisions loomed, stability hung in balance. The interconnected risks ensured no actor operated in isolation, as Iran's crisis tested the resilience of regional and global orders. Economic figures continued to worsen in key metrics, amplifying calls for adjustment from various factions. Military posturing near strategic sites reflected this underlying pressure, blending defense with deterrence. The analysis revealed how institutional fears of fragmentation influenced responses, favoring unity narratives over transparent reforms. Open-source discoveries from trackers and imagery provided windows into realities that official channels obscured, empowering viewers to connect dots independently. Escalation layering showed domestic woes constraining external options, creating a feedback loop of vulnerability. The situation evolved with dangerous possibilities always present, governments maneuvering within narrowing spaces. Further tactical visualizations included reports of adjusted shipping patterns and infrastructure priorities, each move carrying economic and military weight. Public psychology shifted under sustained pressure, with resilience giving way to frustration in pockets that security forces monitored closely. The premium script of geopolitical reality demanded attention to these nuances, where small operational fears compounded into larger strategic dangers. Alliances adapted, markets reacted preemptively, and the hidden story persisted. In the end, the crisis inside Iran, marked by fuel shortages and economic strain despite vast reserves, highlighted profound systemic challenges amid ongoing global tensions. The situation remains fluid, with sources drawn from open-source intelligence and verified developments as of the period. Governments and militaries continue to watch closely for shifts that could redefine the balance, leaving the full scope of consequences yet to fully unfold.